Hi everyone, it's Dr. Nye, and we are covering material from our final lab, the female reproductive tract. So we're simply going to go down our list of terms, and we have first the mons pubis. So it is quite literally a mound of fat, right, sitting in front of the pubic symphysis. And obviously there is adipose tissue. This develops during puberty in the female. And then we're going to look at two additional terms, the labia majora, which are the thicker outermost folds or lips, labia, and these have hair on them and really on the lateral aspects of the labia majora. Then we look at the inner folds, okay, so those are identified as the labia minora, okay, so these are the labia minora. And once again, if we're identifying certain aspects of the handout, you see that right here that this would be the hood or prepuce, which covers the clitoris, okay? So again, where would the clitoris be? You see the tip or the glands of the clitoris right here. And we have other specimens to look at this in more detail, but this is the clitoris, the prepuce or the hood. And again, if we look deeper into the vestibule, okay, so remember the vestibule is a space between the inner lips. And you can readily identify the vaginal opening or the orifice, okay? And then if we move anterior to that, you see the opening of the urethra. So again, the urethra. And then surrounding the urethra, we have paraurethral glands. So really the glands themselves lie deeper in this tissue, and they happen to be in the anterior wall of the vagina. Okay, so again, you see the opening of these paraurethral glands or Skene's glands. So they would be at the anterior aspect of the vaginal orifice, and at the posterior aspect of the vaginal orifice, there are openings from the Bartholin's glands, which are also identified as greater vestibular glands, okay? So again, they're simply little holes or openings, and they're hard to identify, but again, the paraurethral glands are anterior, and the greater vestibular glands would be posterior to the vaginal orifice. All right, so, just to give you a perspective of this specimen, you see that, again, right behind the pubic bone here, we have the presence of the bladder, and we have, of course, the uterus. And the uterus is basically anteroflexed. So it means it's tilted forward, okay? And now we're looking at the posterior aspect of the uterus. And obviously we see that we have associated with the uterus. And again, it happens to be wrapped in ligamentous tissue, but we have the oviducts, or again, the uterine tubes. And we're simply following these to the most distal end, and you see the presence of the infundibulum. Okay, so these are the fimbriae of the infundibulum, all right? And obviously they are paired, so we have one on the opposite side as well, okay? Now, look at the ligamentous tissues. So really we're talking about the fact that we have the broad ligament here, and then where the ovaries would be attached to the actual uterus itself, we would have the ovarian ligaments, okay? So again, the ovarian ligaments are attached to the uterus, and then the suspensory ligaments are further out. But we'll look at another specimen to identify these structures. Okay, so let's look at this isolated specimen, okay? And again, to give you an idea of what we're looking at, okay? So what I want to show you is that, once again, this would be the a uterine tube. So here's the isthmus, right? Here is the ampulla, the infundibulum with the fimbriae, and this is the broad ligament here, okay? So where we have the ovaries, so the ovaries are enmeshed in connective tissue. So where we have the ovaries attached are the ovarian ligaments, right? So we see an ovarian ligament right here. Here's my ovary. And at the distal portion, here is the suspensory ligament. And within the suspensory ligament, we have the ovarian artery and vein. Okay, so remember, these are basically going to be suspending, the ovaries from the pelvic wall. And these are the suspensory ligaments. Once again, here's the uterine tube, here is the ovary. Okay, it's quite a different perspective when you look at all the associated connective tissues. All right. Okay, so other details. I want to go back to looking at the underlying. Now remember what we just covered. Okay, we looked at really the female vulva. Okay, so the vulva is, once again, the external genitalia, and all the labia have been removed. And now we are looking at the underlying tissue right here. So people, once again, this would be the clitoris, and this is the body or the corpus of the clitoris. This is the glans or the tip of the clitoris, and it is analogous to the penis. It's erectile tissue. It is corpus cavernosum. Now, these are the legs. So these would be identified as, they are each identified as a crus. Collectively, we would identify them as crura, okay? So again, all corpus cavernosum. Now, here are our vestibular bulbs, okay? So again, the vestibular bulbs are like brackets, like parentheses, okay, on either side of the vagina. So here is the opening to the vagina, okay? And here, again, I would describe it as being posterior to the clitoris would be the urethra. So here you get a very good view of the female urethra. It is significantly shorter than the male urethra, obviously. But again, you see that the urethra does not travel through any part of the clitoris, okay? So here is the clitoris. Posterior to that is the urethra. Posterior to that is the vagina, okay? So just to give you a perspective, remember the vestibular bulbs that form a parentheses on either side of the vaginal orifice, they are corpus spongiosum. So here are the vestibular bulbs. Now, let's look at an isolated uterus, okay? And once again, we've basically made a longitudinal cut in this structure. And this region is the cervix, right? We talked about the cervix. We talked about the fundus being the domed portion, and then the body, okay, which constitutes the vast majority of the uterus. And obviously this is the uterine cavity, right? Okay, so relative to the cervix, obviously you can see it's rather thick. It's several centimeters, okay, in length. And the initial opening into the cervical canal is the external os. Then we go down the cervical canal, which again we would harbor cervical mucus in this area, and then we have the internal os, or opening into what? The uterine cavity. Okay, so again, here is your cervical canal. And then I will show you another specimen that is helpful to identify these structures. So people, this is a uterus with the associated fallopian tubes, and this is a great view of the infundibulum and the fimbriae, okay? Those little finger-like projections. Now again, this is the uterus, and you can see that we can identify the cervix right here, and that is the external os, the opening. Now, this is part of the vaginal canal. And remember, the vaginal canal basically goes around, wraps around the sides of the cervix. So this would be the fornix. Okay, we talk about these fornices that exist. So the fornix is the space between the vaginal wall and the cervix. So this is the fornix, okay? So it gives you a perspective. And then finally we have, okay, an isolated vagina. So it is a muscular tube, muscular elastic tube, and you see the rugae or the folds, okay? So again, this is that muscular elastic canal, which is the vagina. And remember, this would more or less wrap around, right, and anchor to the sides of the cervix. So vagina, and once again uterus, and here's the cervix. And let's look at some isolated ovaries. So people, these are isolated ovaries. The surface is that harder outer covering, the tunica albuginea. Okay, so that's what I'm pointing to. And I know these are ovaries isolated from a mature female, somebody who is beyond puberty, because they look bumpy. So these would be the developing follicles. Okay, so you see the bumps, again, on the surface of the ovaries. So everyone, that is essentially it for the female reproductive tract, and thank you.